Alright, so we're doing the same thing we did with Walt, but this time for Gustavo Fring. And Gus is interesting because he's presented as this professional, calculating businessman who only does what's necessary for his operation. He's supposed to be the opposite of Walt's emotional, ego-driven decision-making, but when you actually break down Gus's kills, some of them are just as unnecessary and brutal as anything Walt does. Some are about sending messages, some are about maintaining control through fear, and some are just straight up revenge. We're gonna go through each major kill Gus is responsible for and figure out if it was actually necessary for his survival and business, or if it was excessive and avoidable. Let's get into it. Starting with Arturo, and this one's unnecessary, like completely, totally unnecessary. So Arturo is this mid-level dealer working for Hector Salamanca. He's not particularly important, he's not particularly smart, he's just a guy doing pickups and deliveries. And during one of these pickups from Gus's operation, Nacho orchestrates this situation where the payment comes up short. Now, this shortage is actually part of Nacho's plan to undermine Hector. Nacho's trying to make Hector look bad and create problems between Hector and Gus. But Arturo doesn't know that. From Arturo's perspective, this is just a screw up with the money. Gus uses this situation to make a point. He suffocates Arturo right there in front of Nacho and Juan Bolsa. Just holds a plastic bag over his head until he's dead. Then Gus calmly explains that this is what happens when people are sloppy with his money. But here's the thing, Arturo wasn't actually a threat to Gus. The money situation could have been handled with a warning or maybe a beating to make the point. Arturo was just a low-level guy following orders. He wasn't plotting against Gus, he wasn't stealing, he was just caught in the middle of Nacho's scheme. Gus kills him to send a message, to show everyone that he's ruthless and that mistakes have fatal consequences. It's about establishing dominance and fear, not about eliminating an actual threat. From a survival standpoint, Gus didn't need Arturo dead. This was a choice to be brutal when he could have been just firm. It's unnecessary violence to maintain a reputation. Verdict, unnecessary, Werner Ziegler. Werner's death is tragic and it's also completely unnecessary from a survival perspective. So Werner is this German engineer Gus hires to build a super lab under the laundry facility. Werner's a professional, he's good at his job, he's leading a team of construction workers on this massive underground project, and Gus keeps all these guys essentially imprisoned during construction. They can't leave, can't contact their families except through monitored calls, can't go anywhere. This goes on for months, and Werner starts to crack under the isolation and stress. He misses his wife, he's exhausted, and he makes a bad decision. He sneaks out for a few days to meet his wife without telling Mike or Gus. Mike tracks him down pretty quickly. Werner is not trying to run permanently or expose the operation. He just wanted a few days with his wife before going back to finish the job. He's apologetic, he understands he screwed up, and he's willing to come back and complete the work. But Gus decides Werner has to die. He sends Mike to kill him because Werner is now a security risk. Werner knows about the lab, knows where it is, knows what it's for, and Gus can't trust him anymore after he broke protocol. Here's the problem with this reasoning. Werner's not a criminal, he's an engineer. He doesn't know who Gus is beyond being the guy paying for this construction project. He doesn't know about the operation or the cartel connections. He just knows he's building an underground laboratory for some vague industrial purpose. And Werner's not the type to talk to authorities. He's a professional who's worked on sensitive projects before. The whole reason Gus hired him is because Werner's discreet and reliable. One mistake after months of isolation doesn't change that. Gus could have brought Werner back, finished the lab project, paid him his money, and sent him back to Germany with a warning. Werner would have gone home to his wife and never thought about Albuquerque again. The risk of him exposing anything was minimal, but Gus chooses execution instead, and it destroys Mike emotionally because Mike liked Werner, saw him as a decent guy who just made a human mistake. Mike has to shoot Werner himself, and it's one of the moments that shows Mike what kind of person Gus really is. From a pure survival and business necessity standpoint, Werner didn't need to die. This was Gus being absolutely zero tolerance about security to the point of killing people who pose minimal actual risk. Verdict, unnecessary. Lalo Salamanca. Now Lalo is different. Killing Lalo is absolutely necessary for Gus's survival. So Lalo is smart, dangerous, and suspicious of Gus from the beginning. He knows something's off about Gus's operation. He doesn't trust the setup with the Polo's chicken restaurants. And Lalo starts investigating, asking questions, looking for evidence that Gus is playing the Salamancas. Gus tries to have Lalo killed in Mexico by sending a hit squad to his compound. That fails spectacularly. Lalo survives, and now he's even more dangerous because he knows for certain that Gus tried to kill him. Lalo comes back to Albuquerque secretly. Everyone thinks he's dead, but he's alive and investigating. He figures out about the super lab under the laundry. He finds the construction site, he gets proof of what Gus is building, and Lalo's plan is to show this proof to Don Eladio and the cartel, which would completely destroy Gus. The cartel would see that Gus has been building his own operation behind their backs, planning to cut them out. They'd kill Gus immediately. So when Lalo breaks into Gus's house to force him to call off his guards at the laundry, Gus knows this is life or death. If Lalo gets that proof to the cartel, Gus is finished. Everything he's built, all his planning for revenge, it all ends. Gus manages to kill Lalo in the super lab after this tense confrontation. He shoots out the lights, uses the darkness and his knowledge of the space to get the advantage, and shoots Lalo. This is pure survival. Lalo was actively working to expose and destroy Gus. He had proof that would get Gus killed by the cartel. There's no scenario where Lalo stays alive and Gus survives. One of them had to die, and Gus made sure it was Lalo. You could argue Gus created this situation by trying to have Lalo killed in Mexico in the first place. But once that attempt failed and Lalo knew Gus was his enemy, killing Lalo became necessary for survival. Verdict: necessary. The cousins, Marco and Lionel, are sent to kill Walt after the incident with Tuco, and Gus manipulates the situation so they get killed instead. This is necessary for Gus's business. So the cousins are Hector's nephews and they're cartel enforcers. They're ruthless, efficient killers who don't ask questions. Hector wants them to kill Walt for what happened with Tuco, and they're ready to do it, but Gus needs Walt alive. Walt is cooking the purest meth Gus has ever seen. Walt is essential to Gus's operation and his plans to build his empire. If the cousins kill Walt, Gus loses his golden goose, so Gus redirects them. He convinces them to go after Hank instead, since Hank is the DEA agent who actually killed Tuco. Then Gus tips off the DEA about the attack, so Hank has a chance to defend himself. The cousins attack Hank in a parking lot. Hank kills Marco and seriously wounds Lionel. Then Lionel ends up in the hospital and Gus has Mike finish him off by injecting something into his IV. Now, was killing the cousins necessary? From Gus's perspective, absolutely. These guys were either going to kill Walt, which Gus couldn't allow, or they were going to keep causing problems trying to get revenge. They're not the type to just give up and go home. Plus, once they attacked a DEA agent, they became a liability. If Lionel survived and got interrogated, he might reveal information about the cartel's operations. He might mention names or connections that lead back to Gus. Gus needed Walt alive and he needed the cousin situation resolved permanently. Redirecting them toward Hank and then ensuring they didn't survive was the cleanest solution for his business interests. This is cold and manipulative, but it's genuinely necessary for Gus to maintain his operation and protect his asset in Walt. Verdict: necessary. Juan Bolsa gets killed by Mexican police after Gus tips them off about his location, and this one's unnecessary from a survival standpoint. So Juan Bolsa is this high-ranking cartel member who acts as a liaison between Gus and Don Eladio. He's been working with Gus for years, facilitating the relationship, helping coordinate business between the cartel and Gus's distribution network. But after the cousins get killed and things get complicated with the cartel, Gus decides Juan Bolsa is a loose end. Juan knows too much about Gus's operations. He's been present for important meetings and decisions, and Gus is starting to plan his move against the cartel, so he needs to eliminate people who might interfere or warn Don Eladio. So Gus provides information to the Mexican federales about where Juan Bolsa will be. The police raid the location and kill Juan in the shootout. But here's the thing, Juan wasn't actively threatening Gus. He wasn't plotting it against him or planning to expose him. Juan was just doing his job as a cartel middleman. He was actually useful to Gus in maintaining the business relationship with Mexico. Gus kills him preemptively because Juan might become a problem later when Gus makes his move against the cartel. But in the moment, Juan's death isn't necessary for Gus's immediate survival. This is strategic elimination of potential future obstacles, not dealing with active threats. Gus is playing the long game and removing pieces from the board that might interfere with his ultimate plan for revenge. From a pure survival necessity standpoint, Juan could have been left alone. This was about setting up Gus's eventual move against Don Eladio, not about immediate danger. Verdict: unnecessary. Tomas is the kid who gets killed by those dealers Jesse has problems with, and it's never explicitly confirmed in the show whether Gus ordered this hit or if the dealers did it on their own. So we're gonna discuss this as a hypothetical. If Gus did order Tomas to be killed, it would be unnecessary. So Tomas is this 11-year-old kid being used by dealers to sell on corners. He's Andrea's little brother. Jesse finds out about this and gets upset because these dealers are using children. There's even a whole thing where Jesse confronts Gus about the dealers using kids, then Tomas ends up dead. shot and left on a corner, and it's implied that the dealers killed him because he was becoming a problem or because they wanted to send a message. If Gus knew about this or ordered it, the logic would be about controlling Jesse, making Jesse angry at the dealers so Gus can later play the reasonable authority figure who helps Jesse deal with them. Or eliminating a witness who might cause problems, but killing a child is never necessary from a business standpoint. Tomas wasn't a threat to Gus's operation, he was just a kid caught up in the trade. There's no scenario where an 11-year-old needs to die for an empire to function. If Gus was involved in ordering this, it would be about manipulation and control, not survival. It would be about managing Jesse's emotions and loyalty through traumatic events. That's psychological warfare, not necessity. The show never confirms Gus ordered it, but if he did, it would definitely be unnecessary violence against someone who posed zero actual threat. Verdict: unnecessary if Gus was involved. Victor. Victor's death is one of Gus's most shocking kills, and it's completely unnecessary. So Victor is one of Gus's loyal employees. He's been working for Gus for a while, helping with the operation, doing what he's told. After Gale gets killed and things are tense between Gus and Walt, Victor goes to the lab. The problem is, Victor was seen at Gale's apartment complex around the time of the murder. There are potential witnesses who might have noticed him, so Victor is now a security risk because he could potentially be connected to Gale's death by investigators. When Gus shows up at the lab the next morning, Walt and Jesse think Gus is there to kill them for having Gale murdered. They're terrified, but instead, Gus walks over to Victor, pulls out a box cutter, and slits his throat right there in front of everyone. Victor bleeds out on the floor while Gus just calmly changes his clothes and tells Walt and Jesse to get back to work. Now, Gus might justify this as necessary because Victor was a security risk after being seen near Gale's place, but there are so many other ways to handle that. Gus could have sent Victor out of state, could have given him a new identity, could have just kept him away from anything connected to the investigation. The real reason Gus kills Victor is to send a message to Walt and Jesse, to show them that Gus is in control, that he's willing to kill his own people without hesitation, that they should be terrified of him. It's a power move designed to traumatize them into submission. From a survival standpoint, Victor didn't need to die. He was loyal, he was useful, and the risk of him being connected to Gale's murder was manageable. Gus killed him to make a point, not because it was necessary. This is actually one of the moments that shows the difference between Gus's careful businessman persona and his actual ruthless nature. He'll kill his own people just to maintain psychological control over others. Verdict: unnecessary. Don Eladio and the cartel. This is the big one. Gus poisoning Don Eladio and most of the cartel leadership is absolutely necessary for his survival and his ultimate goal. So here's the backstory. Years before the show starts, Don Eladio had Gus's partner Max killed right in front of him. Max was Gus's friend, possibly more than a friend, and definitely the person Gus cared about most in the world. Don Eladio shot Max in the head and made Gus watch. Ever since then, Gus has been planning revenge. Everything he's built, the chicken restaurants, the distribution network, the super lab, all of it is ultimately in service of this goal. He wants to destroy the cartel that killed Max, but he can't do it directly. The cartel is too powerful. If Gus just attacks them openly, he'd be killed immediately. So he plays the long game. He builds his empire, makes himself valuable to the cartel, waits for his opportunity. That opportunity comes when Don Eladio summons Gus to Mexico to make peace after all the tensions with the Salamancas and the cousins. Gus brings a gift of expensive tequila, and he's poisoned the tequila. At the party, Gus makes a toast. Everyone drinks, including Gus himself. Then, over the next several minutes, everyone starts dying. Don Eladio, all his lieutenants, everyone who drank. Gus vomits up the poison and has an antidote waiting, but everyone else dies. Now, was this necessary? Absolutely. Gus could never truly be safe or independent as long as the cartel existed. Don Eladio controlled Gus's business, took a cut of everything, could order Gus killed at any moment. Gus was always going to be subordinate to the cartel unless he eliminated them. Plus, this is about Max. Gus spent years planning this revenge. This isn't just business, it's personal. But it's also strategically necessary because the cartel was always going to be a threat to Gus's autonomy and survival. By killing Don Eladio and the leadership, Gus eliminates the power structure that controlled him. He creates a power vacuum that allows him to operate independently. It's the culmination of everything he's been working toward. This is necessary both for Gus's revenge and for his long-term survival and freedom. He could never be truly secure while the cartel existed. Verdict: necessary. So if we break down Gus's kills, we've got a mix of necessary and unnecessary violence. The necessary ones are Lalo, the cousins, and Don Eladio with the cartel. These were situations where Gus was genuinely threatened or where his long-term survival and freedom depended on eliminating these people. Lalo was actively trying to destroy him. The cousins were going to kill Walt, who Gus needed. The cartel controlled Gus's entire operation and killed the person he loved most. The unnecessary ones are Arturo, Werner, Juan Bolsa, and Victor, and possibly Tomas, if Gus was involved in that. These were kills that served Gus's purposes, but weren't actually required for survival. They were about sending messages, eliminating potential future problems, or maintaining control through fear. What this shows is that Gus, despite his professional demeanor and calculated approach, is willing to use excessive violence when it suits his purposes. He's not just doing what's necessary to survive, he's using fear and brutality as tools to maintain his empire. The difference between Gus and Walt is that Gus is more consistent and strategic about it. Walt kills out of emotion and ego. Gus kills as part of a plan, but both of them cross the line into unnecessary violence more often than they'd probably admit. Alright, let me know in the comments if you think I got any of these wrong. Gus is one of the best villains in television history, and his motivations are complex enough that you can interpret a lot of his decisions in different ways. The Werner one especially, I know some people think that was necessary for security. I just don't see it that way.